The living room was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of a floor lamp. Daniel turned toward the sofa, his voice carrying its natural, resonant weight as he asked a simple question about their evening plans. Before the last syllable left his lips, Rebecca stood up, her body rigid. She did not answer the question. She stepped forward, eyes narrowed, and cut him off. "You are standing right in front of me. Why are you yelling?" Her voice was thin, sharp, and carried the force of a physical blow. Daniel flinched. The warmth of the room seemed to vanish. He took a half step back, his shoulders slumping as the air left his chest. He looked at his hands. Then at the floor, his own volume dial instantly turned to 0. "I am sorry," he whispered, the sound barely audible over the hum of the cooling system. He turned away, his stride heavy and hesitant, and retreated toward the kitchen. He did not look back. Rebecca sat down, picked up a magazine, and did not speak again. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The years bled into a blur of public humiliation. At a crowded restaurant, Daniel leaned in to share a thought, but Rebecca sighed loudly, turning her head away to signal her performative embarrassment to the table. He stopped mid-sentence, his hands curling into fists beneath the tablecloth. At family gatherings, he learned to stay in the corner, his voice reduced to a hesitant murmur that barely reached those around him. He watched his own confidence fracture like glass under the weight of her constant, silent judgments. Then, the atmosphere grew colder. The house shifted into a landscape of sterile blues and sharp shadows. Rebecca began leaving her phone face down on the granite counter, always angling the screen away from his line of sight. Late nights became a pattern of excuses. One evening, the truth surfaced in a brief, accidental message notification from Michael, an old acquaintance he had not seen in years. Daniel stared at the screen as the evidence of the affair confirmed his deepest suspicions. The exhaustion he had carried for 2 decades hardened into something cold and crystalline. He stopped trying to reach her. He simply watched, waited, and let the final threads of his loyalty snap. The kitchen felt smaller than usual. Daniel stood by the counter, his presence anchored and steady, watching Rebecca as she paced the length of the linoleum floor. She stopped, her jaw set, and let the resentment of years spill out in a rapid, jagged list of his failures. She pointed at him, her movements erratic and sharp, cataloging every perceived flaw until she reached the final, biting verdict. "Your voice literally disgusts me," she spat, the words vibrating in the cramped space. Daniel did not flinch. He did not raise his volume to match her intensity. He stood tall, his gaze fixed on the wall behind her, the weight of his long-held silence finally finding its resolve. He took one step toward the doorway, pausing only to look back at her one last time. With a voice that was cool, measured, and devoid of its former hesitation, he replied, "Then you will never have to hear it again." He turned, walked through the hallway, and pushed the front door open. The latch clicked into place behind him. He did not glance back at the house, stepping into the evening air with the weight of the past finally falling away from his shoulders. 13 years passed in quiet rhythm. Daniel sat in a sun-drenched room, the light falling across a wooden table where his son now rested his elbows. The son looked older, his features drawn with a persistent, heavy weariness. He had just returned from a visit to the home where Rebecca lived with Michael. "Mom's house is exhausting," the son said, rubbing his temples and staring down at his coffee. "She is constantly yelling." Daniel leaned forward, brow furrowed, expecting a tale of renewed volatility or domestic strife. He asked if there was trouble between the two of them. The son shook his head, his expression shifting to one of weary disbelief. "It is not what you think," he explained. "Michael's hearing has deteriorated over the last few years. He can barely hear a word. Mom has to shout just to be heard at all." The room fell silent. The irony hung in the air, heavy and absolute. The woman who once claimed that Daniel's natural voice was a source of disgust was now forced to spend every waking hour screaming into the void of a house that could not listen. Daniel sat back, the tension of the past decade dissolving into a sudden, sharp clarity. A slow, knowing smile spread across Daniel's face. It was not a smile of triumph or petty malice, but the quiet expression of a man who had finally set down a heavy, invisible burden. He looked past his son through the glass of the window toward the garden. Sunlight bathed the leaves in a warm, steady glow, and the silence of the room felt like a sanctuary. He realized then that time had performed a work more precise than any vengeance he could have sought. The cycle had closed. The very thing she had once condemned had become her own daily reality, a mirror reflecting her own actions back upon her. He stood up, walked to the window, and pressed his hand against the cool frame. Watching the wind stir the branches outside, his life no longer revolved around the echoes of her judgment. He had moved forward, and in that movement he found his freedom. Karma had its own schedule. And for the first time in his life, Daniel was content to simply watch the world turn. He turned back to his son, his eyes clear and calm, and poured more tea. The past was a closed book, and for the first time he was finally reading a new chapter.